I had never experienced such loneliness as I felt during my life, during my time in the military. I'd never been so far from home and from every present support of my family and friends. Suddenly, my close-knit family wasn't there for me, except by telephone. I couldn't sit around the kitchen table with my mom and dad and spill out my heart over a glass of milk and a slice of sweet potato pie. Hearing their voices over the phone brought on an ache so deep within me that I couldn't shake it off when I hung up. My loneliness deepened when I received the fateful call from my girl back home, the call that ended a long-standing relationship. It had come soon after I was forced to go casual. I first met Mia when I was 5 years old. Our fathers worked together and our mothers attended a morning club, so our families carpooled 4 days a week. Mia and I hated each other. Our earliest memories were riding in the back seat of the car and fighting. If I touched her arm, she would say I had boy germs, which would make me touch her arm all the more. Our quarreling didn't end when we reached school. The teacher would make us sit in chairs to stop the fighting. For the next 2 years, we were determined enemies. When Mia transferred to a parochial school in the area, we lost touch with one another. After the incident in second grade with Mrs. Pennyworth, my mother transferred me to a Christian school, which I attended until sixth grade. At that time, my folks transferred me to another church-run school, Portland Adventist Elementary. My courage flagged that first morning as I climbed aboard the school bus to head for my new school. My only comfort was that my niece Shannon would be riding on the same bus. She and I were the last kids picked up from the East High. When she boarded the bus, she took the first available seat, leaving me to go all the way to the back of the bus to find a place to sit. Worse yet, the only seat available was next to a girl. I could hardly think of anything worse than being forced to sit by a girl. The girl took one look at me, frowned, and moved as far from me as she possibly could. We didn't speak the entire bus trip. As we rode, I kept looking at her through the corner of my eye. Occasionally, I would catch her doing the same thing with me. During recess that morning, she came to me and said, I thought that was you. You don't remember me, but my name is Mia. My mouth dropped open, and I stared unabashedly as she walked away from me. I hadn't seen her since preschool. Mia was by far the most beautiful girl I'd ever seen, but I had no intention of letting her know that at the time. Nothing else changed between us. We began fighting again. We argued about everything. She was my worst enemy the entire school year. Whenever we had our biggest fights, people would tell us that it was a sign that we really liked each other. This forced us to put on a dramatic show of how much we disliked each other. Mostly we'd yell and call each other names. At times, Mr. Williams, the bus driver, would pull over and make one of us sit in front of the bus and the other in the back. Our relationship changed the night my cousin Yolanda invited all my friends from the neighborhood and from school to my birthday party. Mia sat beside me all evening. We had the greatest time together. We laughed and talked as if we were old friends. But at the end of the evening, I still didn't trust her. I kept waiting to feel her first sarcastic jab. It never came. During the party, my friend Sean invited me to go roller skating with him and his friends the next evening. Mia made certain I knew she would also be attending. When I got to the rink, I saw her from afar, and that's the way it stayed all evening until the last skate. My cousin Robin grabbed Mia by the hand and brought her to me. Terry, skate with Mia. Robin thrust Mia's hand into mine and left us standing there looking at each other. By the end of the skate, we were crazy about each other. Mia and I dated for more than 4 years until I went into the military. When she learned that I'd enlisted and would be leaving home almost immediately, she cried. The night before I left for Texas, we discussed our situation and decided to wait to marry until after I'd completed my military training. The separation turned out to be more than our relationship could take. I never felt so empty and alone as I did the night I hung up the phone from talking with her. She cried and I cried until there was nothing to say but goodbye. Knowing that I had to go back to a less than friendly environment made it all the more difficult. With every abusive word or deed that my training instructor heaped upon me, I became lonelier still. Yet I longed to be alone, to think about my situation. When the other guys went to the base recreation hall, I hosted major pity parties in my room, at which I was the only guest. The temptation to quit, to give it all up, to go home, constantly teased the corners of my conscience. At the police academy, I felt more out of place and lonelier than before, if possible. I wanted to share my anxieties, but to whom could I go? My buddies? They were gung ho for combat training. That's why they had signed up for the academy in the first place. My training instructor? Hardly. When I was forced to go casual, my isolation became almost overwhelming. The other cadets had moved on to their assignments, so whatever friendships I might have been forming ceased. As my loneliness built, I blamed others. It was everyone else's fault, not mine, and eventually I blamed God. I cried out in my frustration. Why are you punishing me? It's not fair. At the time, I couldn't understand anything but my own misery. I couldn't see that God had a plan for me and that I needed to learn to wait on Him. But with my mother and the base chaplain telling me to stick it out, I managed to hold on through the lonely times. One of the loneliest times came the first year when I transferred to the President's Honor Guard in Washington. Because of the holiday galas in the nation's capital, the weeks between Thanksgiving and New Year's Eve were the busiest for the Honor Guard. As a result, half the guards had a Thanksgiving furlough, and the other half had Christmas. Distance and cost prohibited me from going home, which meant that I'd spend both Thanksgiving and Christmas alone, 3,000 miles from family. The other guards, with only one of the holidays with their families, were no happier than I. Wherever I went, I heard grumbling and complaining about the situation. That's when I remembered Floyd Matula, my academy religion teacher. Mr. Matula had a policy that he shared with me. When you're feeling bad, find someone who has bigger problems to help, and you'll forget your own. One summer, I got a job taking surveys to identify the most critical needs of the residents in the poorest neighborhoods of Portland. To me, the whole thing was a big joke. Easy money. I thought the people were just lazy and didn't want to work. I'd heard stories of swindlers pretending to need food and money. I'd heard about welfare fraud. I remembered how Peter, a neighbor of ours, had defrauded the welfare system. I had no sympathy for people who lived only to con others. My biggest on the job concern was to hurry and finish the report at the end of the day so I could go home. I remember knocking on doors, hoping no one would answer, seeing people on porches and purposefully walking by without stopping, something I regret today. Because of my summer employment, I signed up for a high school class called Outreach, an easy A. The instructor, Mr. Matula, had heard about my summer job and asked me to be his assistant. After people asked for help, Matula and I would go to their homes to speak with them. He would remind me that before entering a home, I should put away any judgmental attitude and open my heart to that person. Ask God to help you see Him in everyone. I tried it. I was shocked at what I saw. Abused wives who had barely enough money to put a supper of Campbell's soup and day-old bread on the table. Elderly people who spent all their Social Security checks for medicine, leaving nothing for food or to heat their meager rooms. The more I listened, the softer my heart became. I'd prayed that God would soften my heart, and He did. We found elderly people who needed their homes painted. Some needed groceries. Others couldn't do the yard work and upkeep. Some needed warm clothing. I knocked on one door, and a little girl answered. She invited us in. Mommy's waiting for you. Did you bring food? We don't have any food here in the house. The child invited us to sit down while she told her mother we were there. As I looked around the room, I had the biggest shock of my life. On the mantel, I saw a photograph of Frank, not his real name, one of my classmates. That this mother was struggling, not having enough food to feed her kids, and that one of her kids went to school with me every day seemed impossible to believe. I barely recovered when the mother entered the room, followed by Frank. As she spoke with Mr. Matula about getting some clothes for Frank, I could see the hurt and embarrassment in Frank's eyes. I could tell he was thinking that I'd go back to the school and tell everyone about the poverty conditions I'd seen in his home. Before I left the house, I took Frank aside and said, Frank, you have nothing to be ashamed of. We all go through hard times. At graduation, everyone was buying good looking outfits for the event. I knew Frank didn't stand a chance of having a new suit. So a friend of mine, Terry Gish, and I bought Frank an outfit. Incredibly, my friend shared the expense without ever knowing who the recipient was. Today, Frank is quite well off, making good money in the computer industry. And to this day, he gives me a hug every time he sees me and thanks me for not telling the other kids. It was easy to condemn suffering people when I wasn't around them. From my comfortable home or school, surrounded by my family, I never came across a truly hurting person. For the first time, I realized that I couldn't erase the pain by turning off the television or by switching channels. These were real people who had families, people with feelings, hunger pains, who needed clothing and medicine and toothpaste. And their hurt went on day after day, night after night. Coming in direct contact with pain, seeing the people through another's eyes, God's eyes, changed me. That same school year, a sister of mine who lived in Los Angeles died. With limited funds, my parents had to choose between flying from Portland to California to settle my sister's estate or paying my school tuition. The choice was obvious. I'd have to leave school. But the principal and a few other staff members had compassion on me and arranged for me to stay in school so that I could graduate with my class. In the honor guard, away from my home, the first Christmas after my sister's death intensified my loneliness. But the other guards were affected too. Boredom between assignments caused tempers to flare. Our nerves chafed from the frustration of being among strangers and so far from our loved ones. I knew that I, for one, needed a change of attitude. Frustrated, I headed for bed early one night. There, as I pouted over my situation alone in the darkness, I remembered Mr. Matula's words. There is always someone worse off than you and who could use a little help. During the holidays, Volunteer agencies need all the help they can get. Hmm, I thought. If anyone needs to get their thoughts off themselves, it's us. The next morning, I went to see the commander. Sir, I'm going stir crazy. Do you think, do you know of any agencies that feed the homeless that might need some help during the holidays? Later, Sergeant Washington suggested I call Georgetown University Hospital. I read in the paper that the hospital feeds the senior citizens of the community every Thanksgiving, he said. I contacted the hospital and they accepted my offer to help. Possibly I could bring a few friends along as well. After I hung up the phone, I posted a sign on the dormitory bulletin board. Instead of griping about our problems, why not help someone else? Sign up to help feed the senior citizens of Georgetown on Thanksgiving Day. As we boarded the bus for the hospital on Thanksgiving morning, I checked off the names of those who'd signed up. I had expected 10 or 12 volunteers, but 30 came. My friends and I peeled, whipped, beat, chopped, pureed, and grated until our fingers hurt. But we had fun. We were too busy to miss being home. Best of all, we mingled with the guests, helping seat them and serve them, we, and just being friendly. After we had dried the last dish and scoured the last scorched pan, the members of the hospital staff thanked us for our help. I don't know how we could have ever done this without you guys, the supervisor of the event told us. On the way back to the base, several of the guards thanked me for arranging the day's activity. I never been so beat in all my life, one guard admitted. I may never be able to look another potato in the eye again. Thanks for inviting me to go along. Another guard added, before today, I never realized how neat old people can be. I met a woman who's related to Pocahontas. Imagine that. Pocahontas. That evening, as the winter sun disappeared behind the Virginia hills, 30 Air Force guards returned to base, exhausted but content. It had truly been a happy Thanksgiving. That night, as I finished my shower, one of the worst complainers in our unit asked, Hey Johnson, what are we doing for Christmas? I expected to see a sneer, but instead his face glowed with excitement. As Christmas approached, I found a number of community agencies that could use our help. The days sped by as busloads of guards traveled all over the DC area, collecting food and toys for families in need. The public couldn't believe what they saw. The President's Honor Guards had never before involved themselves in the local community and its needs. Soon after the first of the year, Sergeant Washington called me into his office to meet the Honor Guard commander. I shook inside as I entered the office. What had I done wrong this time? The commander greeted me with, Young man, I want to shake your hand. You have brought the United States Air Force Honor Guard more good PR in 4 weeks than most guards contribute throughout their entire service in the unit. Speechless, I grinned and nodded a thank you. I have received a flood of letters from the Georgetown University Hospital personnel, from the Washington Catholic Diocese, from the military brass, and even from the mayor's office, commending you for your volunteer work here in the capital. You've begun a good thing for the Guard. I hope you'll keep it going. Yes, sir. What I'd done had been as much for my own happiness as it had been for the people we had helped. After the holidays, we started a sack lunch program for the homeless in Washington. We involved the Guard in the Toys for Tots program. We continued helping prepare and serve food to seniors, and we began visiting the old soldiers' home. Every 2 weeks, we'd visit the retirement center to get acquainted, listen to the residents' stories, and be their friends. One time, the unit commander assigned one of the crustiest of sergeants to drive the van that would take us to Washington's Children's Hospital, where we would hand out teddy bears to the children in the cancer ward. This sergeant didn't want to go. He pledged he would sit in the van. The children loved our uniforms and shiny medals. They'd run up to us, grab us, and hug us. Because they had so much love to give, we couldn't get away. Well, the sergeant waiting outside became impatient enough to come in to see what was taking so long. When he did, one little 8-year-old girl spied him and dashed into his startled arms. Thank you for coming to see us, she squealed with delight, wrapping her arms tightly around his neck. I love you. Taken aback by the child, the sergeant started to cry. He picked up the girl, sat down with her on his lap, and talked with her. When it was time to leave, he didn't want to go. When I left the guard, the sergeant took over the program. He made sure that the teddy bears for the children's program continued. He developed one of the most positive attitudes ever in the President's Honor Guard. Not only did he change, but so did the entire unit. We became known as one of the most compassionate units in the Honor Guard. A few years ago, our unit received the Presidential Unit Citation Award, the highest award a unit can receive, largely because of the humanitarian efforts carried out for the community, all because of loneliness. God used each of the men's loneliness to teach us compassion. Now that I'm not in the military, I still have times when I feel lonely. Somehow, the excitement of a visit to Disney World or a speaking event in Hawaii dims when I've no one with whom to share the experience. But God knows that too. And in His perfect time, He will fulfill that need in me. For 3 years, I dated a young woman while I attended Oakwood College in Alabama. But my busy speaking schedule kept us apart too often. We broke up just before graduation. My heart was crushed. I dated other girls during my military stint, but I had never been as serious about any of them. I believed she'd be the perfect minister's wife. The loneliness settled in once again. I thought, it seems so easy. It seems as if God has the right person for other people at just the right time. Why can't He do the same for me? Some years later, I talked with my mother about being single and, as a result, often feeling lonely. She told me to stop complaining. Terry, don't you realize it would have been impossible for you to do all you've done if you had the responsibilities of a wife and family? God is using your singleness to bless you. I didn't like what I was hearing, but I knew she was right. Think about it. Since leaving the military, you've completed college, earning 2 degrees. Do you know how many young men have to defer those dreams because of family obligations? You've traveled around the world to more than 60 countries, speaking to thousands of people for God. Could you have done that with the responsibility of a wife and young children? Terry, you finished graduate school in record time, and you're still under 30. God has used your aloneness to bring glory to His name. Half serious, I asked. Are you saying God can't use a person if he's married? Of course not. God can use you in any circumstance, but you've been like the Apostle Paul. It's been easier for you to do God's work because the only person you're accountable to is God. And remember, being alone doesn't mean you have to be lonely. Look at your sister Brenda. She enjoys her solitude. Yeah, I laughed. One day I found her sitting in the middle of her living room floor in her Beverly Hills apartment, reading 3 books at the same time. Can you imagine? Remember, Terry, before you can enjoy other people, you must start by enjoying your own company. I was speaking in a very large city one day. At the end of my presentation, my host told me there was a man waiting near the side door who wished to speak with me. I went to meet the man. He said, "I'm a chauffeur. My boss wants to have lunch with you. She feels she has a lot in common with you." I lifted my eyebrows in surprise. How in the world could a wealthy woman who had her own chauffeur-driven limousine have anything in common with me? "That would be fine," I assured him. "Bring along your host as well. He knows where Madame lives." Now, I've been guests in several beautiful homes in my lifetime, especially in the Washington, D.C. area. Senators, representatives, business persons, incredible homes. But this woman's estate had to be the grandest. A butler met us at the door, escorted us into the family room, and invited us to be seated. A sweet, elderly woman entered the room and introduced herself. She wasted little time getting to her story. She'd been living in a nursing home with a few friends. In 10 years, not one family member had come to visit her. After the years passed, she lost her faith in God. She became grouchy and bitter. One day, a large, smiling black woman, one of the nurse's aides, entered her room and said, "It's a beautiful day." "I don't see anything beautiful about it," she answered. The woman went on. We exchanged the same greeting day after day, year after year. No matter how sorry I felt for myself, this nurse's aide wouldn't give up on me. She was my friend. I smiled, thinking of all the women in the Sharon Church back in Portland that would fit that picture. The woman continued. One day the nurse asked me what hobbies I had enjoyed when I was younger. I thought for a time. Then I told her that I loved to paint. Painted as a child and all the way through college. When I got married and my children came, I stopped painting. A couple weeks later, the aide brought the older woman a lovely set of watercolors. She asked the older woman to paint something. "My friend really seemed to enjoy my work," the woman said. Then the other nurses asked for my paintings. Even the director of the nursing home asked me to do a couple for his office. So at that very old age, I began a career painting. One day, my friend said there was a woman who had just arrived at the home who would like to see me. This woman wrote poetry, some of the most beautiful poetry I'd ever read. The nurse's aide suggested that we get together and produce a line of greeting cards. This woman's poetry and my art. That's what started the whole thing. Requests came from all over, including from the state governor. We were offered a very large sum of money for our creations, more than I'd ever seen in my entire life. The woman handed me several samples of her designs. As a result, I became a very wealthy woman very late in life. Imagine going from life in a nursing home with no friends and no family to this. I'll tell you, we made sure that the nurse's aide was well taken care of for the rest of her life. The elderly woman leaned forward and cupped my large black hand with her frail white hands. "Mr. Johnson, you see, the nurse took our loneliness and brought us together so we could help others. You may feel lonely at times, but God has a special plan for you. What seems like a negative situation is God's opportunity for good."